actually the largest pavilion in the fair.
The Institute, as envisioned by Henderson Shuffler, would be a place to celebrate the lives of ordinary people with diverse national origins who settled Texas.
He said, I don't want to start a museum. I don't want a depository of artifacts. I want a statement of people's background.
It's interesting. This was his idea back in the late 60s, which is an idea that now is the cutting edge idea in the museum world.
After all, I had 9 months, essentially, give or take, to create what is now the Institute, including the building.
It was the first time I'd ever seen a multimedia show, a show where more than one type of media was used to make the show. And the first time I sat down in the Dome and saw that show, I was just swept away with the ideas and the beauty of it.
This was early showbiz, really. It was spectacular on that level, even from the entrance coming in. When you look to the right and you look down, and there was this incredible water fountain, waterfalls, and then you went through the door over the bridge, and the first thing that hit you when you went in was this gigantic neon Texas flag.
Linda Johnson Robb came to the fair and wanted to spend most of her time at the Institute of Texan Culture. And she kept asking me these minute questions about Texas history. Finally, I said, you know, I do believe you probably know a great deal more about this than I do.
Henderson Shuffler saw the Institute as a linking system for all peoples of Texas.
And he saw television and radio and photography and books and all this as media that linked us all together.
And that's how KLRN, the fledgling educational TV station which was operating out of Cambridge Elementary School, got moved into the Texas Pavilion. For KLRN, it was also a move from black and white transmission into the world of color TV.
Color was brand new in the mid-60s, and here we were, a modest little educational television station, and we were going to get color before Austin did, so we were pretty thrilled about it. It was literally almost an around-the-clock process of getting all that equipment installed and up and operational, because we were up against the deadline of April 6, 1968. It absolutely had to be in and operational. So no, from my standpoint, it went pretty smoothly.
The whole operation was done in a way that I think probably Bill Mull might not have realized was as easy as it was. We were kind of on pins and needles trying to come to grips with a lot of the things at the last minute.
The opening day festivities were, I believe, our opening day of color coverage. GE donated the cameras. Almost everything was donated.
And right away, on opening day, KLRN began producing a daily show from the fairgrounds.
KLRN was doing a live show, noon to 12:30.
But we recorded it and then subsequently distributed it to about 18 other public television stations around the country, as far away as Hawaii. And we thought that was pretty tall cotton to be sending images from San Antonio and the HemisFair around the world. And we had some wonderful talent coming through San Antonio in those days.
It was done more or less in the Johnny Carson format. There was an audience that was normally tried to be rounded up just ahead of showtime from people that were attending HemisFair.
I was just on it briefly as wearing my yellow coat. Then I went to work for KLRN the day HemisFair closed.
Joanne Winnick came from Wisconsin to work at HemisFair and never left, but she had no connection with KLRN at that time.
My closest brush with KLRN in those early days of the fair were seeing the people with the microphones and the cameras on the berm at the Institute of Texan Cultures.
I was particularly impressed by the architecture of the U.S. Pavilion, that round structure. I mean, I've been living in San Antonio. Things were square.
For the U.S. exhibit, Francis Thompson produced an unforgettable film with narration written by W.H. Auden.
I remember the film in the U.S. Pavilion beautifully. It started so small in 3 little theaters, black and white.
David Amron, I think, did the music, so the music was incredible, and the sound system was like I'd never heard.
You were in a room and you saw a small screen, and the screen was talking about early days of the United States. And then you saw a small plane, much like the Wright brothers biplane, begin to take off. And as that plane took off, all of a sudden you begin to hear the roar of a jet, and that image changed to that of the jet while the screen grew.
The screen begins to part and go out to, I think, 180 feet across.
And then all of a sudden the walls just left.
And suddenly you were in this big room, and it really was this whole physical idea. There's a group of people, and all of a sudden we're swept up together in this idea of one nation.
And the next thing you know, you're on a 747 or something, zooming through space.
You experienced the little efforts that grew into a big national concept.
It was powerful.
The film was talking to us about the effluent in our streams. So it started out by really with a wake-up call. And it went from there to, I think, some racial issues, some cultural issues. And so we thought it was wonderful that our country was strong enough to be able to present a film with so many provocative images in it.
Laterna Magica was just one of the most dazzling and exciting venues at the HemisFair.
It was the first time that I had ever seen a film experience where the actors literally stepped out of the film.
You're showing the film on a screen that is vertically latticed, and you see these actors burst through the screen in 3-dimension, full life action, and then pop back.
And in this Beethoven Hall, where they had it, it was in 3 segments, parts 1, 2, and 3. And you could only come in and see one segment at a time, so you had to go in 3 different times to see the entire production.
The Czechoslovakian pavilion, the Czech designer Josef Svoboda designed it, and it's probably been an influence on me the rest of my life.
This is an example of a toy magic lantern. This is one of the kinds that are in my museum that has now 600 of these. That's what started at HemisFair, was this Laterna Magica.
I remember the fountains, the beautiful fountain that was almost like what we would have thought as a Sputnik kind of thing, and it just burst with water all over, and it was beautiful. But I remember a few times it was down because kids put soap in it.
The Peacock Fountain was just evocative of the best time, where everything is glowing and gorgeous and for that moment.
Trinity University professor Bill Bristow designed a bird fountain called Migration for the U.S. Pavilion.
His was actually quite exceptional, but it was part of trying to give this feeling of being near water and of being cool, which was very important.
We must have brought in 24 fountains. More than that, there were 100 fountains on that site, but we brought in 24 major fountains.
There was a fountain that was a participatory fountain where all sorts of people at all heights turned to different spouts and spigots, and the fountain was made to, and people would spend 30 minutes, 45 minutes playing their part of the fountain.
This fountain was part of Project Y. A year before the fair opened, 11 schools in San Antonio began work to create this spontaneous space for youth and families.
So it was a way of bringing the community actively into the fairgrounds. And the walls that were built were beautiful by the children and the parents and the teachers. The buildings themselves at Project Y were made by stacking up concrete bags and spraying them. They were just temporary buildings.
This guy brought in his stackcrete and dumped it off the truck, and the kids built, by and large, the kids built the youth pavilion.
It was a very special thing for us as kids because it made us feel that we were a part of HemisFair, and it consisted of a space that was both open and enclosed, and the thing that I remember most about it was the graffiti wall and the performance space.
My task in there was to perform with a folk singing group, and it was called the Octet Plus.